I should check him out, and then I'll. What is up, everybody? It's so good to be back. Ben Stewart Podcast today. Somebody that I've known for quite some time, but actually haven't seen him in quite a long time, but you have probably heard of him as well. He's doing some incredible stuff. Bill Ottman. He's the CEO and co-founder of Minds.com, which came to life in 2011. Now, Minds is an alt-tech blockchain-based social network. Users can earn money or cryptocurrency for using Minds, and tokens can be used to boost their posts or crowdfund other users. Minds has been described as a more privacy-focused mainstream social media network. And they're taking a different approach, in my opinion, to many of the problems causing the behavior that we're seeing out of social networks out there, the centralized ones. So get your questions ready, take your microdose of infinity. Let's get to it on the Ben Stewart Podcast. All right, we are back. Bill, man, how you doing?
Hey, great to be here.
Yeah, got Gordo over here pushing some buttons.
Doing my thing.
Doing your thing. Man, like, you know, not to go into some backstory, because I really want to dive into the meat and potatoes, man, but we were just chatting about, when was that, 2010?
No, it was probably 2012.
It would probably have been, yeah, so it was after you already launched Minds that we were in Brooklyn. You came out to a show when I was in the band Hyrosonic with Ian Crossland, who people would know is constantly on Timcast IRL. And Yeah, man. Like before, I mean, I had just gotten into the films. I actually don't even know if maybe we talked about this and I can't remember, but how you even came to know who I was, probably Kymatica or Esoteric Agenda.
Yeah. And I think we had chatted online about that a little bit. And then we saw that you were in town and wanted to hit you up just because, I know, like, did you write the music for Kymatica with Hyrosonic, or was that just you?
That was just me. I just did that on actually a freaking Dell computer that's sitting right over here. Yeah, that was me.
Nice. You still have the machine. Good. I'm glad.
I do.
No, I love that drone because and actually I had also reached out to you to use a loop from that kind of drone segment for a show that I did with Daniel Pinchbeck and Dr. Neil Thies.
Oh, cool.
And you had said, oh yeah, sure, man, it's cool to use like a little bit of the audio because I remember I would watch Kymatica like as a meditation for a period of time. There was like when I first discovered it, like because it's an audio experience. Like you can just have it on in the background, and it is just so relaxing to me.
Yeah, I had a lot of people tell me that, like, thank God I used my voice the way that I did, because a lot of people, especially in this space, the way they use their voice when they're narrating sounds alarmist. It does something to the nervous system. And I really, I made it a point to speak from like a deep piece, which has obviously a different effect on the nervous system. And I chose to do soundtracks. I had a few people, saying like, I feel like you're brainwashing me. It's all this like very droney stuff and loopy visuals behind everything. Beats. And I was like, yeah, I want to put you in a state of, a state of being that causes a little more peace, and like go through it and see if you can find any subliminal messages. I'm sure they're awesome. So
did you align your voice to the Schumann resonance?
I tried to, but then I hit the brown note and shit my pants. So didn't happen the way I wanted it to. With that being said, now that we perfectly greased the wheels here, dude, so from that moment, or like right around 2012, I want to know, maybe this is a good launching off point. I want to know, like around 2012, like what was the first year after the launch of Minds, not just look like to, the forward facing, the public side of things, but like, how was it for you? How was it for the team? Did you like just fully know, like, this is the future, it doesn't matter what fucking obstacles come up? Or did it seem at any point like this is a mountain, this is Mount Everest?
Yeah, sort of both. It's like this impossible mission, but also inevitable. Like open source, free and open source software is the future. So it's like, it's a known situation. Like that's where tech is moving. Like all tech is, it used to be, there's this saying in kind of Silicon Valley that software is eating the world. But now it's open source is eating software. And just because it's that transparency is just spreading. Like the new viral systems, whether you're talking about blockchains or, other decentralized systems in crypto, is just more transparent, more secure, just better in so many different ways for creating more of like a trustless, consensus-based society. And so we always knew that was going to happen. And like open source sort of evolved into crypto because, crypto started as cryptography.
Right.
It's not cryptocurrency. And so, cryptography is like the original invention that, has been around for forever. But, the application originally with like PGP, email, encrypted email systems. And so, and that was all grown out of the original open source privacy movement with like the cypherpunks. And it's just like that started taking over. And so you just know that industry after industry, it's going to take over. Like Linux took over operating systems. Firefox did historically a pretty good job at taking over the browser, but now Chrome, but Brave is actually based on Chromium. So Chromium is actually the open source core of Chrome, and then Brave basically forked Chromium, and so Brave is based on that. And Brave's a privacy browser for people who don't know, and they have a whole crypto integration. And so it's just like, and now money being taken over, and just, you know, go down the list of things. So over time, it's gonna happen with social, and it's happening with social. Like there's, you know, other really great alternative social networking sites that are open source as well. That I'm sure, you know, you're probably on a couple of them. I do feel like there's a little bit of a rift in the alternative social realm where some are open source and encrypted and like kind of decentralizing. Others are sort of saying that they're alternatives, but they're not alternatives fundamentally from like the way that they're architected. I don't want to name names because I'm not trying to call people out necessarily. I can if you really want me to. But
well, before we even hop into that, because this is a really juicy territory, and I just want to make sure that those, you know, those that are listening like fully understand. There are some that are out there. I mean, this audience is going to understand, but there are some that are out there that don't even really understand that with social media as like the main ones that you can think of out there, you don't own like anything there. You don't own what you put on there. And it's not even all about ownership, but it's like the way that data works, everything, you're putting it on their platform for a use that only they get to manage. It doesn't even have to be something that the end user gets to know about. I remember you said this one thing. I was just watching a talk that you had given, and you had mentioned how Facebook changed the way people engage with their very own audience. So like you have 5,000 people following you or something like that, but you can't reach them because your reach is limited. And I remember you saying, and I'd wonder if like this is updated in your mind at all, but like that's to make people pay to boost it so they can reach their full audience or something along those lines.
Oh yeah, think about how sick and sort of such a bait and switch Facebook pulled on us. And we're streaming on Instagram now, right?
Yep. No, we're streaming on YouTube.
YouTube. Okay. So yeah, a lot of them are doing it, but you know, historically you could actually reach a fair amount of your audience on Facebook. But then in the period around like, honestly, probably around 2012, they really started changing the algorithm so that you're only reaching a few % of your own followers or friends, which is in itself such an absurd idea. Like, okay, the purpose of social media is to post and have your friends see your posts. Like it's a publish, you know, kind of subscribe model.
It's social networking. It's meant to be social.
Yeah, it's like maximize the intercommunication between parties who want to subscribe to each other. And they distorted that very core concept. And so now everything is going through their secretive algorithm, which no one knows what it does because it's closed source. And they started pushing what they want you to see into the feed. You know, maybe some of that was what you're posting to your friends. And like that was heinous in ways that, you know, okay, yes, you have that basic way that we just discussed, but like there were businesses, creators, brands that were, you know, they were running their businesses based on the expectation that they could reach their like a whole media industry went out of business when Facebook started changing their algorithm because people couldn't drive the same traffic. And I'm not saying that, you know, anyone has a right necessarily to Facebook or anything, but like to what you're saying is in Web 2, there is a disconnect between the users of the platform and the owners of the platform. So, you know, there's kind of this meme going around about Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. You know, Web 1 was really just, you could finally like read anything and like access anything. You could search on Netscape or Ask Jeeves and go find the information. There was a little bit of chat and whatnot, but not much. Web 2 was really read and write. So suddenly Facebook, Twitter, YouTube pop up. Everyone can start creating. It's amazing. I mean, I'm not sitting here trying to say that Web 2 did nothing valuable. I mean, we're even using it now. Like there's geniuses that build these platforms, and there's so much good consensus that has come out of it about like what counts as a good communication tool. Right. But now we're moving more into like the decentralized web 3, where it's read, write, and own, and where we're like inverting the model where the creators come first. Revenue gets shared with the creators. Creators own their content. They're not going to get censored. So it's sort of adding this new layer of more sovereignty, which is the goal. And we're not there yet. It's still like a little ways away before it's streamlined, but yeah.
Well, yeah, so I wanted to like grease those wheels mainly so we could have just a better understanding of what you were even talking about, that and I don't even care if we do name specific names, but like the ones that you said are operating under a banner of being highly different, but fundamentally they're not. I want to understand that better. Like what, at least in principle, is not that different from these other companies that sets minds apart.
Yeah, I will. It's in it. Because I'm not trying to like throw jabs or anything, but basically I have a litmus test for every app that I use. And I'm not saying that like I'll never use, like we're using Skype right now. Like Skype has, is sort of like a original kind of epic company, but they're also a Microsoft closed source surveillance platform. So It's like, there's a give and take. Like I would, over time, I think that there's going to be solutions where we can be doing the same thing and not giving any energy to Microsoft, because I don't want to give energy to Microsoft. They've never cared about, these types of important digital rights issues before. But, typically when I'm deciding if I'm going to support a new app or network or not, it's like, one, is it free and open source software? Not that you're even a coder or would ever even look at code. That's not the point. Like most people don't care. But it's the same way as if, do you read the ingredients on your food? No, you just look for the organic label. You want to know that some standard somewhere is making sure that this is not, nasty factory farming. You just want that general understanding. It's very similar with free and open source software. Like you can actually, when you go to a site, typically, if they are open source, there'll be a little thing in their footer where it'll link to the code. And that's just, or there'll be like a little icon to GitHub or GitLab where you can go and check it out. And it'll say developers, or it'll say docs. And those are, that's a signal that this company is being transparent with their technology. Yeah. And again, it has nothing to do with whether you're actually going to read that. It's just, it's a principle, and it shows that they're probably more conscious of these types of issues. And so like examples of, like you have free speech platforms like Rumble, for instance. I think that they're doing good things with free speech. Apparently, I haven't heard of too many crazy bans on there of people who shouldn't get banned, but like their whole stack of software is closed source. They're using Google Analytics on their, for their analytics systems. Like when you use Google Analytics on your website, you are literally becoming like a tentacle of Google. And you're basically, whether knowingly or unknowingly, abusing all of your users. And, it's so tempting though, because Google Analytics is sick and it gives you amazing data, and it's just, the UX is awesome and it's just totally nice software, but it's evil. Because they're not being transparent. We have no idea what it's doing. It's certainly exploiting everybody who's visiting. And why do you want to feed Google? So it takes longer to build up really robust analytic systems from the ground up. And it's all about taking shortcuts. And, when you're doing a startup, it's hard. Like you want to use tools that exist so you can move faster and make money and survive. And so like, I totally understand the trade-offs that people are making, but like there comes a point where you just have to stop. You can't use them because there are alternatives that are emerging. And even though it takes a little bit longer, you don't want to be locked in to those systems. And then they literally are owning your users, and they know everything about your whole community. So that's sort of the trend. And then there are lots of companies that, like Odyssey is an example of an open source. Like they are open source in a library. All of their code is free, and they get it in that sense. So I definitely support that. And I don't know. It's again, and it's not like a judgment call. It's like, I'm not trying to sit here on some high horse. It's just a general philosophy about, why would you look at what just happened with Getter. So I don't know if people
I don't know Getter.
So like
the new Twitter
it's kind of like a new Twitter thing. And basically Robert Malone went on Rogan and, talked about Getter. He's like this old guy. He's a boomer. And he's like, oh, okay, I'm not going to get banned. And, Malone seems like a totally legit dude who, has he seems to be acting in good faith from my reading of him. But so he joined Getter because he was getting banned from LinkedIn and Twitter, and just ridiculous situation. Getter is basically started by the Trump campaign manager, Miller, and it is a totally closed source surveillance app. They went sort of ban happy on, like, they say that they're free speech, but they're literally not free speech. Like, if you read their terms, the terms are worse than Twitter, but they're just saying that we're free speech. But they're sort of like conservative version of free speech, like not First Amendment based version of the free speech. So, like, for instance, no sexual content is allowed.
Right. It's very Christian-like.
I'm not. I'm not like pro porn necessarily, but it's like, look, if you're either First Amendment based or you're not. And if you're First Amendment based, like even Twitter allows porn.
Yeah, hardcore.
There's full porn on Twitter.
Yeah,
that's so funny because it's not something that
a lot of people point that out when they're like, "Why are they not being canceled?"
Yeah,
and it's so weird that like it took for you to say that for it to fully dawn on me that porn is on Twitter. Are there other social media or social networks that like do the same?
That allow porn?
Not really, actually. It's sort of a rare, like, we allow it. We have NSFW filters for it. And we really, we want to make sure, like, Twitter doesn't even have NSFW filters for it. Like, if you just go diving in on Twitter, and I actually, in an odd way, respect that about, like, that's the hypocrisy of Twitter. It's like, wait a second, you're saying that I'm going to get banned on Twitter for saying something like what Meghan Murphy said, where she just said a man is not a woman.
Mm-hmm.
She gets banned for life. Or like learn to code, banned. But yet full-blown porn, okay. Like, but and that's an odd sort of inconsistency with a lot of the some of the progressive crowd, where it's like they're very pro free speech for like sex workers,
right?
Which I think is great, and absolutely support that. But for some reason, they're not pro free like other speech than that. So
it's I mean, it's slut shaming if you take down the women who want to express themselves, and I'm fine. Like but exactly, you got to be principled on everything. You can't just selective outrage.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's I think we're really getting into a point where like we're starting to see that some people they actually, a lot of the audience, they see through the nonsense. It's just at what point do they feel the pain enough to make a leap from currently where they're already at, they're already comfortable, and to actually like what is it that causes you to move to another platform? Because I know that when the whole thing went down with Trump, where did he go? Was it BitChute, or what did he start using right afterwards?
He wanted to make his own.
He keeps launching, and he's gonna be launching this new one called like Truth Social. It's funny.
Relaunching.
Yeah, relaunching.
Like
yeah, there was another one.
Yeah, I guess the point that I wanted to make was something that I was even hearing you talk about, Bill, when it comes to like bad behavior, like trolling and things, like censorship is not the tool that actually you were making mention to, like more extremism comes out of censorship. Free speech actually seems to, historically or statistically, people, they'll still have these little spats, but they seem to talk it out and deal with it and like manage it amongst themselves. It doesn't need to be top down coordinated or managed. Is that correct?
No, yeah, this is, and we're releasing a whole paper on this in February that we co-authored with Daryl Davis and a couple of PhDs.
Yeah, he's awesome.
On basically, it's proven that censorship causes radicalization. So, because we're sort of talking about like network topology and systems theory. So like you can censor something in an isolated system. So if you're on like a subreddit, or even if you're on a isolated social network, like, yes, if you ban all the use of X, the use of that will stop on that platform. But the internet is a network of networks. So the people just either morph the language that they use and will use like new encoded memes to articulate, what they just got banned for, or they'll just go somewhere else and become sort of more reinforced in their beliefs and have less access to people who can even change their mind. Like, you cannot change someone's mind. Here, the thesis of our paper is that basically free speech networks can result in a higher rate of de-radicalization purely based on the increased communication valves that they offer. Mainstream censorship social networks result in less de-radicalization because they're banning the people who could be de-radicalized. So they're literally making it physically impossible for people to be reformed, even if whether they're extreme or not. A lot of people get banned and they're not extreme. Some are. And so it's like a almost undeniable physical fact that they're sort of engineering this this radicalization. And there's lots of studies, all different that we've compiled, because people don't have there are literally very few legitimate arguments that are pro censorship. And that's why, to your point initially, like just looking historically, globally, geopolitically, even comparing like speech laws in the US versus authoritarian regimes, like it's pretty sort of intuitively obvious that that free speech creates healthier societies. And so you would like pretty much assume that would translate to digital societies and kind of make sense in that context.
So then do you feel that they're aware of these studies and then they're just knowingly disregarding them?
That was going to be my question.
I mean, to
like,
basically,
do you theorize? And sorry, Gordo, I just decided to start talking straight over you. Yeah, I was curious about the same thing. Do you theorize about like, if it is known to this degree that there is this kind of, do you think it's just stupidity? Like, well, we need to appease the board and the board doesn't get it, but like, we're going to go ahead with it anyway. So even though, there's, millions or a billion people on this platform, we're going to do this thing that we know causes more, radicalization. Is this ignorance and ineptitude, or do you think they're trying to exacerbate a problem and just give it a different PR spin? Like, oh, it was out of our hands. We didn't realize that it would have done this.
I think it's both. So I think there are definitely researchers within these companies that are aware of this information. And I also think that there is a tinge of, I'm going to throw the toxic oil barrel in the lake because I don't want it to be my problem anymore. Like, I just basically don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with the PR backlash. And I'm not willing to explain to the media and to the world that actually the ethical model is to talk to extremists. You have to talk to extremists or terrorists or criminals, even like even compare this to rehabilitation and the prison systems
or children
bullying. I mean,
totally.
It's all the same psychological sort of plane.
Circuit. Yeah.
Gotta allow a path for redemption.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the first thing that I'm thinking about. That is like, I go through the thought process of, I have 3 kids, 2 still in diapers. But they're not idiots. And at 3 years old, my kids know when I'm stifling their communication. And when I stifle their communication, even if it results in what I wanted it to, which is just a lowering of the noise level, if I stifle their communication, I see that it cuts off a natural process of expression, of free expression in them. And even though I get the result of quietness, I notice that something unnatural starts to grow in its place. And that's kind of what I feel about like the whole free speech thing. And you would mention there was this, he's on the board. He's an African-American fellow that I guess like brought over 100 people out of the KKK just by simply befriending them.
Daryl Davis.
That would have been Daryl Davis.
Yeah,
then.
Movie.
Yeah, that was Daryl. Yeah, he's on our team. Yeah. He is just such a hero. I mean, the number actually over 200, probably more than that now. And these are KKK members, neo-Nazis, and we also had a co-author of our paper, Jesse Morton, who actually tragically recently passed away. He is a former jihadist, Islamist recruiter who de-radicalized. And so he's sort of like living proof of this transformation process. And, he sort of, after he became de-radicalized out of Al-Qaeda and he joined the whole de-radicalization community and is very close with Daryl. And so Daryl has done so much more good than any of these journalists who think that they're on some sort of a moral high ground for, like, when journalists go around and criticize all these sites for having problematic content, all the media hate around, like, basically calling anyone who supports free speech an extremist,
right? Or
like enabling racism or whatever it is. These people have literally never de-radicalized anybody. They've never done anything like what Daryl has done. They don't dare talk to someone who is on the opposite end of the spectrum. They don't have the courage to do that. It is a social charity essentially to engage in that type of discourse, what Daryl is doing. Like, these people just rant online. Like, they're not involved in actual healing. Like, this is a healing process that we need to make it like more mainstream. And so we're trying to like actually reframe the whole experience of social media itself, wherein you're not like coming to just, boost your brand and like own, the libs or own the conservatives. Like, it's not, that's a frame that Twitter encourages. They want that clash, and, they're clearly on one side of the spectrum, but like, what if the whole purpose of going on to a network was to actually find people that you disagree with and befriend somebody that is totally different from you, and even that you think is just a vile person. I mean, I'm not saying that that's something that we all need to be doing like all the time, because, you know, in the end of the day, you probably want to mostly hang out with people that you think are cool. But it's definitely valuable to spend a portion of your time going out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, I mean, like, it just makes me think, like, you know, what if this is not something I'm calling for as a thought experiment, but what if there were mandates that you had to at least engage in, you know, if you're going to declare some kind of identity to a party line or to something, an ideology, something that defines you, that you're willing to lay down life and limb for, that you converse with some balancing aspects. You know, you converse with balancing aspects to show at least a sign of faith. It's like a faith. It's a gesture to an open community. And I love the fact that you said the word heal. It's not something you would imagine anyone in the tech realm is really talking about, but there's a massive wound that is exacerbated by the radicalization of, on both sides of the aisle, the left and the right, but the main legacy media with their eye rolls and their snickering, and they're only talking about one side, but really engendering a general high horse that you can sit on if you follow their narrative, and then you know, a general disgust in the other side. You know, so in planting seeds of disgust, like, this is nowhere close to what we are coming to know in psychedelic communities or in any community that is conducive, in a conducive environment to healing. So it's valuable to hear you say that, because, like, I don't know that I've heard anybody else speak about a platform in terms of, like, how can we heal a rift that is very obvious to most, but most people think, well, throw more gasoline on it. That must help.
Yeah, I think it puts people almost on the floor when they start to reframe, like, the dynamic that we're talking about. Like, when, you know, because it's so easy to get into that, honestly, mode of hatred. Like, you know, you talk, these people are criticizing hate speech with hate. That it is a pure hatred that is emanating from them and their writing, and you know, that they're maybe unintentionally sowing, like, deep trauma. And so the compassion based approach is, like, the only way to look at it. And it's similar to, you know, you hear stories about, I think there have been like really good documentaries about this, but, you know, where maybe the mother of a murdered child meets the murderer in prison and finds so much healing power in talking to that person, and, you know, getting over it, or at least, you know, starting the process of doing that by confronting the issue and finding that humanity, even in, like, the absolute, you know, darkest areas. It's totally necessary. And, like, psychologically speaking, there's, you know, so many studies that back up kind of the confrontation approach, not in, like, not a negative confrontation, a positive one.
Yeah. Closure.
Yeah. You know, so you were on Rogan, it would have been 2 years ago now. Was that before or, like, right after the pandemic?
Before.
Okay, so right before. I want to know, like, and this is only if you can even remember, like, the nature of the conversation, like, back then, and what would you say that it has anything, like, I'm sure it's probably, like, hit the accelerator, you know, but is there anything that you see now that you, like, you wished you could have, like, brought up at a time like then, that, like, this whole world scenario has, you know, to me, made it a bit, not just a bit, but for those who are paying attention, a hell of a lot more relevant, why Minds is making a gesture towards a direction that we could go. because Gordo and I were talking just earlier. It was something about just one function that you have, like if there's a dispute of a post, then they can select a jury. And that's something, you know, like I know a lot of people that would be like, oh, well, juries, that's, you're just going to like American political ways of going about it. And it's just like, wait a minute, that's a gesture to democratize and open it up to the community itself, rather than it being like, well, who makes the decision? Well, somebody at Minds, I don't know. It's a locked box back there. It's these gestures, and I kind of feel like that talk that you had with him 2 years ago, I'm like, damn, there probably is so much more that you would be able to say on a platform like that now as opposed to back then. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, the jury, I'm glad you brought it up. I've actually been working on the jury all day today. Wow. Like, because we're doing like a whole revamp of it. Right now, it's only being used for the appeals process. So like, if somebody disagrees with the decision that got made by our team, then it gets appealed, and then that appeal pops up to a random selection of 12 active users. And then, so those users can basically overrule us. And, you know, because at the end of the day, like, we don't want to be in the middle. I have no desire. I want the community to be in charge. I want the community to own it. And it's a gradual process to actually build this sophisticated technology to enable that. But we're going to be bringing the jury into like every layer of decision and so like moderation decisions, but also curation decisions. And so, you know, because like the feed ranking algorithms that are used on like Twitter and YouTube, it's all like totally backwards. It's I think that, you know, there is a power to votes, but their stuff's mostly based on surveillance. But I think that, you know, crowd curated stuff is much more powerful than secret algorithms. And then also like voting on trust levels and voting on responsibility. So we're going to create multiple tiers of decentralized trust where, you know, you can bring in people to invite people into the community and bring them through the jury, and then they can get increased responsibility and curation power and moderation power. And just because, you know, you think like Facebook spends tens of billions of dollars on moderation. Yeah. You know, I have no desire to build a massive bureaucratic moderation infrastructure. It's like the community needs to self-govern. And, you know, yes, there are certain risks with you know, the power of the mob, but you could also call it like, you know, the public mind. So it's like there are risks, and we need preventative measures to like make sure that bad behavior in these jury contexts is prevented, and there's like defense mechanisms against, you know, dangerous mobs, because that absolutely can become a problem. But like, all right, so that's that. But then in terms of Rogan, I mean, it's very similar things going on, but totally accelerated. I mean, even just Joe has like, you know, with the whole Spotify thing, right, with all the COVID censorship has brought things to a much more like red alert level, because the discourse that is being shut down now is extremely this isn't, you know, we're not talking about, you know, racism anymore. Like, that's still getting talked about. And like, we all agree racism is a real issue, but like hate speech, you know, when I was on before, it was like more like we were starting to see the escalation of hate speech being whatever that means. It means whatever they want it to mean. You know, that was really beginning, and that's bad. You know, that's definitely legal speech that needs to exist, like we were saying, in order to be able to get confronted and for the people to kind of duke it out and have these conversations, even if they're hard conversations. But now the fact that everything's being called misinformation, which means whatever they want it to mean. And also people are getting banned for life from platforms for saying something that later turned out to be true.
Right.
And now they're banned permanently and they're cut off from social discourse that's just totally insane. And we're, you know, scientists and doctors are being, you know, silenced. And it's not a judgment call on like who's right and who's wrong, but that's the whole thing. Like, it's not the network's job to say what is fact and what is fiction. You know, Twitter is not a neuroscientist. I mean, no one at Twitter is a neuroscientist. So if you have a post about neuroscience and Twitter, like, you know, some think tank is saying that, oh, this post about neuroscience is misinformation. Like, why is Twitter saying that? Like, if anything, give us a visualization of the debate on both sides, show us citations, show us what all the experts are saying on both sides of whatever debate it is, COVID, you know, abortion, I don't care, like climate change, visualize the debate, and that's all you need to do. Like, stop.
Yeah. There's something that comes up for me because when I think of like, I brainstorm what could the next 100 years of technology do if really put to a use that seems to be not so self-serving and seems to really be there, not to equalize things, because that's not how nature even works, but to allow for the ecosystem to coexist as it naturally does without feeling there, like you were saying before, stepping out a way of being the middleman, let the community moderate in their own way. There's something about that for me that when I listen to that, I hear that is the only way to play inside of a territory where there's the risk is less skin in the game because it's digital, for one. You know, there is still risk, but it's less than, you know, anywhere else. So like allowing for people to engage with community in a way where it could be moderated, you know, by the community. And in a sense, it's allowing the community to learn how to self-moderate rather than be managed, to have a manager, somebody watching over and saying, well, I've decided because I've built this thing that you are all by happenstance living within, I've decided this is how it's going to go, rather than what if this were an ecosystem? How would this naturally balance itself? Like, why don't rabbits fuck us into extinction? Is because it actually follows this thing called the Laplin equation. And it's actually part of an equation that you can see in the Mandelbrot set. These things naturally seem to modulate themselves in predictable ways, but not if there's something unnatural that's standing in the way, like some unnatural obstacle. So what I appreciate about what I'm hearing there is it's even by saying I eventually want to step out of the way. As a parent, I can acknowledge that. I don't always want to have to be dad the way I am now to my, you know, now 3-year-old boys, but once they're 30, I don't want to have the same amount of responsibility. And I feel like there's almost this, with the other networks, this inability to let the child be the child, to let the child be autonomous in its own right. Almost in the same way with the Joe Rogan thing. I don't care what side you're on, but it's like, wait a minute. You know, when Joe gave his explanation to the audience, he said, I like Joni Mitchell. I like Neil Young. Here's what I've reflected upon that I think I can do better. Here's where I stand. You know, here's what I could have done better. And I look forward to doing better. But what did the other side do? They didn't engage.
Yeah.
They didn't ask any questions. They didn't say, hey, do you mind if you take those 2 episodes down? We know that you had Sanjay Gupta. We know that you had somebody from, you know, Biden's advisory committee. We know that you had other vaccine, you know, makers that have alternative views to you. But now you had on these people that I think you should balance those points. No, they said off with his head. Tear down the Mount Everest of podcasting.
Yeah, and the likelihood is that they never watched his show.
Yeah.
They don't know him. They don't understand his nuance, which he has. Mm-hmm. And you know, that it's sad to me that this is where we're at. Like, you know, Joe gave a mature reaction, obviously, because he's a balanced person. But like the fact that is as rare as it is, and there's so many like extremely popular like icons. I mean, Joni Mitchell and Neil Young are amazing icons. I mean, they've written some of the most epic music ever,
defining
All
an
freedom.
era.
All about
about freedom. That's how it's like how, and that
That's the free
shows
world,
you
Neil.
how contagious this ideology is. I mean, like they've just forgotten. I think they just forgot.
They got tainted.
It's definitely possible, and I mean, like, to me, I think this goes to the point. This goes to the whole point of, like, there is an impact of technology and social media, and I think a lot of the times it's also very easy to just find who are the CEOs of the companies that are the worst perpetrators. They're the boogeymen. They're the ones that we need to take out. When it's partly that, and it's partly an ideology that's just, well, that's the best formula we have to advantage ourselves in the best way in this current circumstance that we see in the world. But it seems like Minds is forward thinking in this respect. And I heard you say on the Joe Rogan podcast, this is going to take a while to unravel, but it's inevitable. And I liked seeing that confidence in you, that it's like, you know, like, this is something that's just going to happen. Their Web 2 version of centralized, and you know, like, I'm appreciating that I saw on a podcast you mentioned that Web3 isn't just carte blanche ownership economy. It's not there yet. It, you know, many things could go the other way right now, but it's forward thinking and seeing, like, well, there is a solution, and tech has a central role in it, whether you like it or not. And I just recently, and this is aiming at a question that I want to ask you. Recently, I've been really diving into and considering going through Republic Realm on a course on the Metaverse and creation of DAOs, NFTs, the whole ecosystem. And I think it was Republic Realm that created the $650,000 digital yacht, the highest digital asset, that digital only asset, most expensive one out there. So anyway, like, as I was speaking about this, there's several people that know the old school Ben Stewart, that's, you know, esoteric agenda, you know, primarily, and just like, you know, wow, how did this guy become an apologist for tech and stuff like that? And I'm like, I never said tools are bad. And I think that's where people are kind of like seeing what exists now, and not being able to fully make a distinction between there's the tool and there's those wielding the tool. And the tool itself, many of the functions, yeah, they can be, you know, they can be optimized. But what I'm seeing is the biggest dangers are, like, yeah, we're talking about data and data privacy, but I don't think people have the slightest clue, even those educated of us, how our data is actually being used, and if there is like an unspoken direction that all this wants to go in. And I would say towards sentient world simulation, full mirror, you know, simulations with several avatars of all of us for predictive analytics. And I see the direction going in that way. So I want to hear your thoughts. Future of tech, what you're excited about, what you see concerns about, and how Minds is operating as a very defining role in this grand theater.
Tech is nature. It is an extension of nature. I mean, forever, that's what it has been. So, you know, I used to be, like, back in college, I was very sort of naively anti-tech. Maybe, you know, still using tech, but like thinking that just social media itself was, you know, just this horrible force, and it was making people antisocial and was like super addictive. And it does have those negative qualities, but like, we have to be able to separate out the positive and the negative benefits. I mean, and you know, from like a global consciousness perspective, like, it's very clear that the internet is like the nervous system of the planet. I mean, it's how it's how the planet is going to heal itself, probably. So, you know, in terms of the metaverse, like, Facebook, this is how manipulative they are. Like, to rebrand the company Meta, and
to take that name,
to take that name and have, because the metaverse, like, actually sort of started in, I'm pretty sure, in the Ethereum realm, in, projects like Decentraland.
Yep.
And, these open source sort of self-sovereign systems where people can have these NFTs and kind of these digital personas, but they're owned. And Facebook is trying to ride the coattails of that and, basically co-opt everything into their closed dystopian version of the metaverse. And you see them making like snarky comments on Twitter, like because there's kind of this little like crypto language, and people will say like WAGMI, like WAGMI, like we're all gonna make it, like GM, good morning. And it's like this corporatized version of using this crypto slang, and they're really just trying to act like they're in. And it's like, that's Zuckerberg's history. He's always just like trying to like be cool. Yeah, like, you guys playing cards? Like, I mean, it's just insane. And so I think that, yeah, tech is like creating organic grassroots technology is just where we're going. And yeah, it's like we're growing these new systems, which are, yeah, related to probably some like multi-layered simulation happening. And we're creating, I mean, evidence of, simulation theory is like that we create simulations. So like, yeah, let's create simulations, but let's also, stay grounded in nature too, and create sustainable systems so that we're not, becoming like WALL-E.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and these are like, I think it's important for us to see, this is the one thing I can say about things like WALL-E and all the dystopian futures where literally there's trash everywhere. And I've posed this question before, like, why in all these dystopian futures is there trash everywhere? I mean, usually because like we have our trash everywhere, and with, some wind, it's just going to blow it around. It's going to look like that. But it's also like, it's a sign of what it took for us to, push progress to the max for a short amount of time. And I also see that tech is going to be instrumental in helping clean up this mess. But again, like it's also not the tech. It's not just the tech. It's the wielders of the tech. And what I see is the writing on the wall is this idea of the only real optimized solution that I see to the biggest problems out here is not a solution by force. It's a solution by collective agency. Yeah. Acknowledging, like, okay, not everybody is going to do their own research to the same degree, but you can also look at the mass majority of people out there. They don't do research to make decisions. They follow trends. They follow the herd. They stay within the group. And nature also does that. Look at, wildebeests and stuff like that. 3 lions that could get trampled by like the 1,000 wildebeest that it's chasing. But it's just the idea is leave that wildebeest, be, even though we could overpower it. Let's just keep running. That's what we know. I kind of feel that like this direction that we're moving, I even see, I know what I do know about the metaverse and what I feel coming, and I know what I don't know. And then there's a whole area of what I don't know, but there's something that's calling me inside there that doesn't mean it's just like, oh, we all need to wear headsets and we all need to enter the metaverse. There's something that I acknowledge is coming. It's really literally right on the horizon. I don't know if you saw Bloomberg is saying by 2024, $800 billion market, the metaverse market will be. And that's 2024. It's not like they're calling 2030 even. So like something is obviously on the horizon and it's on this adoption curve. But what I see is so many people are placing this is going to go in the right direction if the right tech is built. And that's true if the right tech is built. But who's at the helm and what is the guiding philosophy? Like the core guiding philosophy of it. And that's kind of what I wanted to focus on with you today is like when you look at Minds, and what I love about it is it's seamless. Like if you know Facebook, if you know how to operate a Facebook page, you would know how to operate within Minds. It's not like a completely different universe, but it operates under a completely different core philosophy, which actually has to do with the empowerment of people rather than the overreach of, no, we're going to make the rules and like you don't own anything. So eventually, I don't know if you're into Alison McDowell, but she lays out the dystopian future of tech pretty clearly. And I think she's missing a few hopeful, not even hopeful, but legitimate key solutions and elements. But I wanted to keep
the whole thing. It's the foundation that the tech is on is really the key. Like, yeah, so we want to keep those amazing user experiences that, you know, big tech taught us in a sense. I mean, there's almost this coalescence of, this is why every app is becoming the same app.
Right.
I mean, literally Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. What are they? They're just feeds, and you have Messenger, and that's it. And you create stuff with your camera, and you just go wild. And, you know, they all have these slight little variations, but they're all sort of becoming the same thing. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. It's like, look, humans are figuring out efficient forms of communication and information exchange. So let's take what makes sense, but like, is that all sort of underlaid by surveillance and like creepy AI and censorship and, you know, secrecy, or is it, you know, the opposite of all of those things? So, and it's similar, like when people talk about Neuralink and, you know, AI, you know, destroying humanity, it's like, look, you have to, if you're not putting everything through like a nuance detector, I'm sorry, like, get in the game. You have to put every single tool through this like litmus test. And so if you're talking about Neuralink, it's like, look, Neuralink is probably going to help like Alzheimer's patients like restore their memory. Like, I don't know. It's probably going to have all these insane health applications that, like, you know, those videos where you see the woman, you know, puts in the new, oral implant, she starts like bursts into tears, and it's like you start crying and you're just like, oh my God, technology is like bringing people's audio sensory mechanisms back to life. And it's like such a beautiful thing, but you just need to make sure that, you know, Google doesn't have a back door into your brain, obviously. So like, like, and this is where I push Elon, like, and I've reached out to him. I haven't heard back yet, but I mean, basically he needs to make that stuff open source. Like, I don't like, cause he seems extremely aware, but like he is still sort of playing this game with secrecy. And I think that he knows about open source because he opened a bunch of the Tesla patents to encourage the battery, you know, the kind of some of the underlying designs to be expanded, because he knows that open information grows markets, but he's still sort of playing that game. And so I'm always thinking like, okay, is there an open source Neuralink competitor? Is there like, what's the open source alternative to X, Y, Z? Like, that's how we got to be thinking. And we just, you have to, like, brands will also like over time change. Like you get into this fear mode when you're starting a business. I remember before we open sourced all our code, like, you know, everyone's a little nervous, and like now we build everything in public. We don't even keep things like behind the scenes. Like, we're just like every day pushing up like everything live. But we used to kind of be a little nervous, and you're like, oh, someone's going to steal our idea. Dude, like, we can't let them steal our information. And you know that you're coming from an unhealthy like place of just of fear and irrationality, and then you open it up and like no one steals your idea, and like and even if they did, because there's different licenses that you can use where they have, and Ian talks about this a lot with, you know, copyleft and free software, and like how the changes have to get shared with everybody. So with our code, it's a copyleft license, which means that anyone can take it, anyone can monetize it, commercialize it, do anything with it. But if they make changes, they have to share those changes with the whole community. With more of a traditional open source license, people can actually, and public domain, you know, that's a little bit more of a familiar term to people, like public domain images and whatnot. You can just use those and give no credit and, you know, make your product totally secret, and it's totally fine. And I actually think that there is some room for that, but it's just like the Grateful Dead knew as well, like, let people record our music, it spreads, it's going to come back to us. And like, you can create novel models for making sure creators, and you know, crypto is going to help this too in NFTs, because you know, attribution is like encoded into the blockchain, and you know, that's kind of, it's kind of where we're going, but it's going to be a little bit clunky. And yeah, it's not one simple answer.
Well, it seems like there's a lot of leading figures. Like from my perspective, I see people like yourself, Lex Friedman, certain whistleblowers like Tristan Harris, Johan Harar. It seems like it's moving towards, and I don't know if it's going to happen at some point, but having sort of some sort of council or humanist technology convention. So where there's sort of this meeting of the minds of similar like-minded people like yourself, but different people and leading, you know, figures in the space. And we already see this with people who are on the other side of the aisle who are more concerned about profit and control. You know, there's classic big meetings, Davos just happened, you know, to do this exact type of thing, to coordinate operations, resources, and all the things you would need to do to affect things at scale. And so I'm kind of looking at it like, well, we just need to do similar versions on our end. And I love the way you approach tech, where it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, the aesthetics, the UX, and all that being beautiful, but changing the underlying philosophy to match the populist-centric that's already kind of big right now. So
for sure. And there's sort of like a rift happening within the more ethical tech realm, which is really sad to me. But like, you know, and I like what the Center for Humane Technology is doing, and I'm, you know, I like Tristan and his work, but I feel like there's something from places like EFF and Center for Humane Technology, and where they're not fully embracing the free speech end of things.
Right. Yeah.
And they're very sort of hesitant to go down that path and really like undeniably stand up for free speech no matter what. There's sort of like this anti-big tech part of the conversation. People like Sacha Baron Cohen, and you know, Elizabeth Warren, and people who are like, they hate Facebook. You know, delete Facebook was actually trending on Twitter today, and you saw Sacha Baron Cohen had like some post with, you know, 50,000 likes, and it's Zuckerberg like in the chair, just like, you know, that like sort of like junky like social media meme. I don't know if you've ever seen that, where the person's just like full of like needles of social media. And it's like, so Sacha Baron Cohen, genius comic, obviously, but like for some reason he's pro censorship on social media because he's been I think like indoctrinated by the ADL, and I've talked to the ADL, and I think that there's certain value there, but they're very much like in stark opposition to our thesis, what we were talking about on the Deradicalization initiative. They actually are trying to make the argument that misinformation and hate speech actually causes real world violence. And this is where like, we absolutely do need like a council and a serious, you know, academic conversation about this information, and where we're bringing the studies to the table and we're looking at the data and we're saying, okay, what is true here? Because we can't just endlessly debate whether censorship works or not, or free speech works or not. Like, if you're going to say that free speech that is causing all of this real world harm, you need to show the evidence, and they don't have much evidence. There are some cases. There are to sort of steelman them a little bit. There are cases of, you know, like on Facebook when, you know, mass shootings are live streamed, or I think in like Myanmar, there was some misinformation that went around and caused, you know, yes, and did so it can cause radicalization in some circumstances. But again, like how we're talking about, what's the risk profile? So both sides have risks, and you really just need to weigh those risks, and it's really a cost benefit analysis in the long term, and asking, okay, over the long term, which system results in healthier discourse and less radicalization? And I'm willing to have my mind changed, and I want to see the studies that they're talking about, but other than a couple of isolated instances, I see very little evidence. Like the idea that this emotional trauma, like they conflate emotional unrest with real world harm. So just because, and it's true that people can get bullied online.
It's like violent video games thesis.
It's the same as the violent video games. Yes. And so I'm not seeing the evidence, and we need to have that conversation. But and we actually, in our paper, and I'll make sure to shoot this to you, we do steelman a couple of the studies. Like there was one specific study that was calling out BitChute, and BitChute, you know, they're sort of a combination, because I've talked to Ray, and he's a free speech guy, and he has the same general philosophy as we do. Their code is not open, which is too bad. I don't know why they won't do that, but I do know that Ray is like not a crazy person, and he's not an extremist. He really does kind of have the same general belief about how free speech can help society. And there was a study that was actually done on BitChute, and it's just so bad. And all of their studies are so bad. And I don't think Sacha Baron Cohen even has looked at any of the actual research. So, you know, we need to make this more academic and less emotional.
Yeah.
How do we do that? I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, you know, not just looking forward into 2022, but roundtable, you know, is that something like a convention where literally the whole point is not like selling tickets, and it's less about the quantity, it's more about the quality, but like to have an academic conversation and to make sure it's not just, you know, a circle jerk of yes men and yes women, you know, not just an echo chamber, but really like rich debate on certain topics. And then also like without like making these endless debates, at what point do we just engage, whether it's we agree to disagree and build two different models, or start moving into this model? Because the way that I look at it is, I agree. I think that there is this inevitability to what you were sensing 2 years ago, talking to Joe Rogan about like the toppling of these, you know, to call it a dinosaur Web 2 is kind of funny, even though it really is. It's, you know, it has a much shorter lifespan. And moving in this direction, I feel an inevitability of it. I also sense that there's a need for the proper engagement from the right individuals. We don't necessarily even need, like, critical mass is not, you know, a ridiculous amount. 4% of the population engaged in the Revolutionary War, you know, for example. So my question to you is, as a filmmaker, I'm also curious, and this is a two-part question, and like, you know, I don't want to like, you know, confuse you with the question, because I'm really curious, like roundtables, conventions, things like that, to help people understand it so they maybe adopt it quicker, and or as a filmmaker, content like films or documentaries or really well done thought pieces that don't seem like they're not pandering to a certain side, or they're not like, you know, trying to maximize the profit of a certain potential, you know, outcome. It's what I felt when I saw some, you know, documentaries back in 2008 and 2009, where it didn't feel like anything other than like, I don't want your money, I don't want your emails, I really just want you to hear this thought piece out. And my curiosity to you is like, what does that look like? How do we get into this adoption curve where people are adopting it for intelligent reasons, so they can fuel the right, you know, actions and behaviors through it?
Well, specifically with regards to the free speech versus censorship debate, I think that, yeah, like it would be sweet to make a film about this journey of like going through the peer review process. I actually think that this debate is going to be won in the peer review process. So like pulling together, and that has to do slightly with our paper. Our paper isn't fully a journal submissible paper in the current form. It could be, in like having like a meta-analysis of all of the research in this area and getting the scientists to basically reach some level. I mean, there's never like full consensus, but like getting to that level where we're seeing it being commonly understood, in the academic community, that the censorship approach just does not work. I think that in documenting that really clearly and documenting conversations and debates between kind of the popular figures in the space, like I think Rogan should have on Sacha Baron Cohen or like the head of the ADL, all those types of meetings. And I plan to reach out to those people as well. And they need to be pressed to show their evidence.
Right.
And I feel like, and so do we. And I am willing to be swayed. Like we're not approaching this paper in this whole initiative in the sense of like, our way or the highway. Like if we can get proved wrong,
right,
I don't think it's going to happen. There's literally hundreds of years of historical context that free speech works.
Well,
and I think
science.
Intuitively, we know that, from nature too. So I really don't think that it's going to be disproven, but we need to be open to the fact that maybe there are some restrictions that need to be in place, but you still always want to have a place for that redemption and that healing process to occur. Otherwise, we just know that those people are just going to keep going down in the gutter.
Yeah. I guess
my concern
you go
is,
ahead, because I have a question.
My concern is just that I'm totally with you, and I see people like yourself, Bill, and so many others who are very willing, for instance, like Alex Freeman, who are very willing and open and wanting to have this conversation and actively seeking audiences. The other side doesn't seem so active, and there's also a massive motivation for this to be not true, right? For your theory to be incorrect, because then it would invalidate all of their major, this whole censorship war, this whole entire culture war. It's, and if they know this data to be true and they're knowingly not wanting to have that conversation, then they're not honestly coming at it from an authentic, open,
that is
way
most
you
likely.
are.
That to be honest is most likely. And Clarence Thomas, one of the Supreme Court justices, actually came out recently and was calling for more. People talk about Section 230 a lot, but actually Section 230 isn't as relevant as this idea of a common carrier. So what he's advocating is that platforms at a certain size should become common carriers, similar to phone companies and whatnot, where they can't play favorites. It's just like customers are customers, and it doesn't matter what your beliefs are or what you say, you're not going to get cut off from the phone company. And I think that so even if you're talking about from a pure business perspective, like the argument that we're making about free speech being better for human psychology is an argument that I think brings an even higher level of ethical grounds to the argument. But even from just like a pure business perspective, why are you trying to ban customers? Like you're literally alienating half of your community. Like that can't be coming from, but they also have half of their community saying, we're gonna leave if you don't kick them off. So they're sort of caving to that pressure. But at the end of the day, they're so big that people are going to stay there no matter what. And they just don't have a spine to do it. So I do think that ideology has infected them. I don't think, and they were actually never free speech. I mean, Twitter was more, they talked about free speech more. I think historically, all the platforms used to be way more free speech. Like there was way more Wild West on YouTube and Twitter, Facebook. And then, they've clamped down, but like a lot, their terms were always bad. So I've never, it's so weird to me that there's not even a single big tech company that has just said, this is a business opportunity.
Right.
Let's not play politics and let's just be and that's why this whole alternative market is emerging, which is a very natural thing, and it's great. But yeah, it is. I think it is ideology because there's not necessarily great business reasons.
Yeah. So here was how I was going to comment, because I too have concerns about this. Also, in a sense that here's one of my biggest concerns is that a Facebook and a Twitter sees the writing on the wall that what you're saying is inevitable, and then they do it and they massage their free speech, but it's still closed, it's centralized, it's not open sourced, it's not doing the other things that you're doing. In a sense, I almost don't know, I just don't know if it's worth it to engage with them to try and change their minds. Yeah. It would be worth it to engage with the general audience, the general people, to change their mind, to adopt the more intelligent thing, because one of my biggest issues is exactly what I just mentioned, that they will be like, you know what? We're all about free speech, and everyone's like, yay. And then everyone forgets that all they did was a minor adjustment when really we need a chiropractic adjustment.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a great point. I think that it's not so much that I agree with you. It's like not the priority necessarily to convince Google and Facebook and Twitter to do that. I do think it's progressively a good thing if they change, like, because they're not going to go away. Like, they're not going to become MySpace. They'll
adapt. They'll morph.
They will morph, and you're already seeing them morphing. Look at the fucking metaverse. Like, they just changed their whole name to do this, and Twitter just did their NFT avatars.
Microsoft just bought Activision Blizzard for Metaverse.
Yeah, they're coming for it, and you're right. They're gonna be forced to change. They will change because they just are gonna do what they feel like they have to do to survive. But until they check every box, there is absolutely no reason to trust them, and don't. But that, it's still like we want the change to spread throughout all networks. Yeah. And so it's positive. If everybody, imagine if Facebook was like, oh, you guys, you want your reach back? Oh, you got those pages on Facebook with like 100,000 followers? Like, we're going to let you reach those people now. That would be great. Like, please do that, Facebook. I mean, you're going to help a lot of people. But it would also, I think, the free speech, I don't think they can handle the free speech. Yeah. I'll be shocked if they do it. So
I think they're programmed, like you take a person who, think of a company as like an individual, very complex, very diverse, but filled with patterns, deep grooves that it's hard to climb out of. You convince them, their infrastructure isn't going to change. The offices aren't going to change. The environment that the decisions are made within won't change. It'll be one thing. It's like, so I really do feel like Minds is so much more necessary because we don't want the change to come from within Facebook or Meta. We don't want people have lost trust to a degree where they're not willing to be like, wow, Facebook really did an about face and fuck, they're cool now.
That Metaverse ad really got me.
I don't see that happening. And I guess the thing that I want to point out, because it's part of me looking at this from a meta perspective, which is really like, what if Facebook, Twitter, these now what you might call like legacy social media companies pulled a Kevin Spacey in American Beauty? It's just like a complete, like, fuck it, I'm just gonna live life and do the right thing and blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. Like, I wonder if, even if that was truly the case coming from within them, I'm wondering whether the human collective mind knows how to properly integrate a story like that's emerging. We're so used to things breaking apart that what if we were to hear like, you know what, COVID's gone, all social media is now allowing free speech. It looks like the most amazing thing is happening in the world, folks, and all the news is like, wow, like this is a great kumbaya moment. I don't know. I don't know. Again, I really don't know if humanity knows what to do with that story.
Well, it's very similar. It's almost like an inverse situation to what we're talking about with forgiveness and healing. It would be requiring the counterculture to forgive, the oligopoly.
Yeah.
We would have to, but it would be so difficult for them to achieve that. But like, I do feel obligated, and I do genuinely encourage that. Like, I think that it's never going to happen, but for us to sort of, I don't want to fall into the same trap of like just being, alternative versus, it's not us versus them. Like
Right.
they're people. And, there's definitely some shady business. Like, I think I have a theory with Dorsey. Like, he just left Twitter, and he is huge on Bitcoin now. He's like obsessed with Bitcoin. And he is going hard at Square. They're building like this decentralized exchange on Bitcoin, and good for him for embracing Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is truly like the big daddy mothership of the new financial system. It is amazingly decentralized and transparent, and it's awesome. I love Bitcoin. And so good for him. I think. But he didn't have, so he left and he said, "Oh, I feel it in my if you read his blog, I feel it in my bones that, these new managers of Twitter are really going to do it right. And, this is the right thing for Twitter." But I can't imagine, especially given all the censorship that happened right after he left. I forget who got banned, because so many people are getting banned. But like 2 days after they rolled out 2 days after he got banned, a whole new policy about banning memes of private individuals. So like, now you can get banned on Twitter just for posting a picture of somebody and they can report it and saying, "I don't consent to that picture," and it can get taken down. That happened 2 days after. And it's just like, I feel like he was really pissed. But then the other part of me is like, well, then why isn't Square open source? Because they're like this amazingly powerful financial company, but none of their code is open source. But I know that Dorsey knows about open source because he's doing Bitcoin and he talks about open source all the time. So it's like, I think that a lot of the big tech executives they have these sort of angels and demons going on inside them. And they have these huge public companies that are behind them that have shareholders that, maybe they're not letting Dorsey do what he really wants to do, but he definitely owns Square. So I don't know. I don't need to like speculate or theorize, but what the good news is that the thought virus is out. Like the whole crypto concept, like every Fortune 500 company is deciding where they stand on it right now. And like the whole economy is shifting. And that's just like that's the power of crypto. And social media is one thing for communication, but when you really talk about the future and the allocation of resources on this planet, like, and the power structure of the planet, the financial system is the base. Like the communication system matters. I mean they have similar amounts of power, but the financial system is so big. And if when we start seeing another order of magnitude growth in crypto, like in Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's the right people are starting to accumulate resources, and the right companies are starting to accumulate resources. Like we raised $10 million, like, in June with, Aaron Wolf, who's like out of Austin. He's like anti-tech, like anti-big tech billionaire. And he is just totally on board with this whole mission. It's amazing to work with him. And we just put like $2.5 million of our money into Bitcoin and Ethereum just to sit there, just because this is where we think that the whole economy is moving. And so if, you can subsidize as long as those markets keep growing, we're going to keep that's we're gonna be able to live off of that as a company, hopefully. And you see Tesla bought $1.5 billion of Bitcoin. Jeez. That's so big. Square bought a massive amount of Bitcoin and holds on their balance sheet. Like, public companies are starting to hold these assets, and it's bringing people out of poverty in all of these, sort of third world countries. And it's like this, amazing system. We can talk about, Bitcoin more in depth another time, but it's such a big deal. And I really think that people need to stay involved with it. And, it's volatile. You got to know that there's going to be 50% swings, because in a real free market, like a truly organic, decentralized technology, like, free markets can swing. Like, the dollar is totally synthetic. And so it stays more stable because it's full of manipulation. Yeah. And you can have manipulation in free markets too, but because it sort of has this this equilibrium that it can find with the supply and the demand, and the way that it's all decentralized, like, it's just so much more resilient. And it's I don't know, full crypto, bro.
I love it, man. I love it. And being respectful of your time, I really want to ask one of the big core questions. I kind of asked it earlier, and that's looking forward, looking into even the not so distant future, for minds. What does growth look like? Obviously more engagement, more users, probably using it. Is there more versatility or deeper function? I know you're probably staying intuitive and just really keeping your fingers to the pulse right now, but are there any obvious directions that you're excited about? And what's funny, I was going to say, if you feel at liberty, or if you're not trying to keep future ideas, under wraps. And I also wanted that to be part of the question, because it's like, for the future of minds, it's a legitimate question. Like, is there room for keeping ideas quiet for the time being, as you're moving through this, competitive nature of the market, and still operating within it? And what do you see as deeper functionality, and maybe diverse directions for minds?
Yeah. Well, our roadmap is public. If you go to GitLab.com/minds, and I think there's certain internal conversations that we have, but we really all of our commenting on all of the issues that we're making and pushing through the development pipeline. I'm really not, I've lost all fear about people. I want people to steal the ideas. If I get hit by a bus, if our team, all dies on a plane crash, people need to know, and someone else needs to pick it up. And so I'm really, I don't care about, keeping ideas secret. And what we're really focused on right now is definitely expanding the jury, so making it foundational to everything on the site. And also, as that relates to distributing tokens and rewards and finances. So right now we sort of have a problem where in countries like Nigeria and Turkey, and I love these people and, want them on minds, but we're sort of because the economies are so decimated in these countries, literally we have rings of tens of thousands of people, coordinating from these countries and coming to minds and trying to earn tokens. But they're doing it in kind of an inauthentic way, kind of hey, vote for vote, blah, blah, blah. Let's earn tokens. And these are real humans. I've talked to these people. They do this because the $2 a day worth of tokens that they can earn on Minds is literally a better deal than their whole economy. Axie Infinity, I forget what country it is, but Axie Infinity is a huge crypto game. A major percentage of their economy is running on Axie Infinity. So we're seeing this in certain countries, and we're seeing, and some of it is real behavior, but some of it is definitely trying to overly extract value from a system in a manipulative way. And so what we need to adapt to that. And that's what the jury can really achieve. Because if the jury is sort of deciding on who is trusted and what engagement appears to be like, is there a ton of spam comments on this post or whatnot? And if the jury can help detect these things, then we can basically have the jury be deciding who is earning the rewards. And the authentic original creators, like after we roll this out, the rewards are going to go up a ton for original creators who are behaving authentically and doing really well. And that's really what we need to do, because at the end of the day, what's going to be competitive long-term is, the best creators in the world are going to spend their time on the networks that provide them with the most value. That's just a fact. Like you can talk about freedom for days, but at the end of the day, what people care about is reach and money. In a very sort of basic instinctual reality, like that is what people, and yes, like these kind of other elements of discourse and compassion and like are really important. I think that they do play a role, but like the reach and the money is how you hit the critical mass. And like we're starting to see major celebrities get into NFTs. Like Bieber just bought his like $1 million Bored Ape NFT. And like, it's really happening. And like, that's all happening on Ethereum. The Minds token which you can check out at minds.com/token, is an Ethereum based token. And you earn it every day for your activity on the app. And then you can use it to boost your content. And you can, there's also like integrations with Uniswap and whatnot. So I think that if we can funnel, like we want to make the best creators on Minds as successful as is humanly possible. Like that is the mission of the company ultimately, is to give as much reach and rewards to the users who are the most sort of contributing the most to the network. Yeah. And like that's really what platforms are competing over right now. And that's why you're starting to see more monetization options emerge on some of these networks. And yeah, I mean, I'm curious from your perspective as a creator and filmmaker, like, are those the type of, I'm imagining those are some of the types of things that are going through your head when you're like, where am I going to give my energy apart from the freedom stuff?
Well, totally. I mean, like for me, I'm very intuitive. I don't do long-term planning when it comes to the content that I make. And, usually a lot of the content that I'm making now, it switches. Like I was about to make a film for Tim Pool's platform called Welcome to the Machine. And then that kind of like turned into a DMT doc. And so Welcome to the Machine, I started with the trailer and just started extending it. And it's a lot of thought pieces that I like, but it's all leading towards many of the solutions that I was talking with you about. In fact, afterwards, I'll just, we can talk afterwards about a thought that I had for you potentially in Welcome to the Machine, but it's really this forward look at what even is this thing that we're building, and how do we open our minds to what not just it's doing with us, but like what are we developing? What's the epiphenomena of this machine? It's learning from us in some ways with these algorithms. So I really like to put content out there on platforms that I agree fundamentally with. It's like I love partying, but I like partying in the right environment with the right people. So that's, as a content creator, every little, I at least try to put as much attention as I can on like, what does it mean that I will put a piece of content on Minds as opposed to, on Facebook? And if I do it exclusively, I've even thought, I don't know enough about the ins and outs of it, but have you had any content creators say like, we will put something exclusively out on Minds?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, there are definitely a lot of people going kind of cold turkey against big tech. And, I think that's great. But I also, typically when I'm talking to the world about it, like I don't necessarily go that far because I know a lot of people need to ease in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm personally like off everywhere else. Like I'll, I still like, I will watch YouTube. I find YouTube really valuable for finding videos and watching podcasts, but I don't like I don't personally have a presence anywhere else. Like I'll still use them and go on them and like check on what's going on. But yeah, like I don't give them my art. I don't, because I just don't think that they deserve it. And, I don't know, some people think that that's going too far, but I also wanted to comment on what so the psychedelic angle. And like, for me, like, I definitely get a lot of inspiration from sort of this, like, I want Minds to be like a representation of the community. That's what it's meant to be. And it's supposed to be a healing tool for the planet. I mean, maybe that might come off as like a little bit too much.
Goals are supposed to be grandiose. So I like the direction.
Like Dennis McKenna made a really interesting comment where, as with DMT, as like, almost the plant is using humans to spread certain messages about healing the planet, similar to how plants will use animals to spread their information and their seeds in different ways, but that it's actually using, humans to spread certain awareness. And I, who knows, but that definitely speaks to me. And I think that the compassion and healing part of this whole thing is like, it really is core. Like, and that's how I feel like when you say those words, like you noticed when I said it, if you're talking to some like anti-free speech person, someone who's just like totally full of ideology, if you use the word heal and compassion with them, it changes the whole direction of the conversation. Yeah. They're not, because a lot of people who are in the free speech realm are very ideological too. And they don't bring that type of information into the debate. So it's very much like this conservative, like Trump free speech type talking points versus, the Rachel Maddows. But like neither of those sides are approaching it from the right perspective. And like, so I just encourage, if people are looking for a way to have ideas about free speech resonate more, bring that in. Yeah. Because that's how you get it to resonate. Otherwise, people just like, no one likes to be convinced, and they certainly don't like to be convinced, if you're not bringing up anything having to do with compassion, like, but you bring that up and it just disarms everything, and suddenly you can talk.
Yeah, condescension and anger don't build bridges.
No, and I think like, when you mention Rachel Maddow and like we're not idiots. Like even the most average and even below average out there of us can see straight through pretense. We buy lies that we want to buy because it's easier to stay within a groove that we're already in. But and I'm seeing that right now with what's going on, in Canada. Not that I even see a side, but it's like there are certain things that I see are evident, but why people still champion it is kind of that herd think. It's safer inside the group. So, for me, what I'm seeing about this is the more authentic the stand, I feel like that has the most legs, right? It's not the PR in front of it. It's not how much power and how many celebrities we can get to push an idea. That you can't polish a turd type of an idea. Like if you start with the best possible premise that really is as altruistic as possible, without being like too idealistic and too grandiose and too impossible with it. But like, this is a great place to start to, you know, to move in that direction, because every other platform, it's impossible to move in the direction that we all know we need to go in. So why are we still utilizing the same platforms? I think it's a framing issue. Most people have not had it framed, and they don't even have the bandwidth because they're so inundated by the kind of media that they're getting through their feeds, and what the very narrow window of the kind of media that they're getting, what it engenders inside them is it's kind of like, you know, and I'll just liken it to this: when in fear mode, you're not open to infinite amount of possibilities. You're not at your peak creativity, right? But when you're engaging playfully, even if there's a lot of skin in the game, when you're engaging playfully and lighthearted, even with a very dense and dark situation, more options seem to open up to you. And that's kind of what I see as like, we need, you said it, as a foundation. It needs to be built on the right foundation.
Well, and yeah, that playfulness and like the comedy element coming into, like, you have these different sort of words that frame the whole experience. Like, and so, you know, whether you have the healing stuff, you have the compassion stuff, the playfulness, the fun, the comedy, like, you know, comedy is invincible mostly because it's approaching that with such like a fun spirit that even the darkest subjects, you know, can make it through and you can pull it off. And it's not saying that all comedy gets a pass, but like, you know, the best comedy is just so true. It doesn't even matter the words that you're saying. You could say the worst possible words and everybody across the political spectrum loves it because they sense your intention. And it's just, you know, Louis C.K. is like one of the best at that, like somehow being able to say the words that no one's allowed to say and saying it in a way that like inverts the whole situation. So yeah. And then the other thing I want to bring up just about some future stuff is, you know, you mentioned DAOs, and I think that DAOs are definitely a big part of the future at decentralized autonomous organizations. And I think there's also a lot of problems with the way that DAOs are working right now. A lot of DAOs currently operate with where you vote with your token balance, essentially. So depending on how much money you have in stake in the project can dictate your power in decision-making in the project. And, you know, Vitalik Buterin, one of the co-founders of Ethereum, just wrote a really interesting piece called Soulbound. And it's about how, you know, essentially decentralized decision-making is the future, but it's pretty obvious the dangers of voting with, you know, money, and like, because then rich people can just take over these different systems. And, you know, NFTs are really important because they're, you know, these singular units. And so you can sort of have token gated communities and communities voting with NFTs. And, you know, NFTs are just single units. And so you could give everyone with a certain NFT a vote in the organization. But then the problem with that is that, you know, say you reward an NFT for some achievement, but then someone goes and sells the NFT. And then so someone suddenly in that community who didn't actually have the achievement to get into the community, and so they sort of purchase their way in. And so there's actually a new concept emerging called non-transferable tokens, NTTs. And
interesting.
There, and Vitalik references this in his blog, and he also makes reference to certain like video game badges, where you sort of, you know, these are non-transferable badges, and there's actually a web W3 spec on these things called verifiable credentials that coordinate with DID, which is decentralized identity. And so what's starting to happen with, you know, whatever you call it, some people don't like the term Web3, but Web3 or decentralized internet is that what we're building this deeply right now is basically, because you can connect your crypto wallet to mines. And, you know, that's whatever wallet you use, and then that's associated with your account. So whether you use MetaMask or, you know, Coinbase wallet or whatever, you can connect your wallet. But And so in the Ethereum realm, you're already starting to see, like, you can sign into all these different apps with your Ethereum wallet. And that's an amazing thing, because your wallet is basically your identity, and it is your username and password. And it's all, you know, you control your assets. You don't need emails and all of this stuff to, you know, that company owns. It's like you own your identity, and then you sign in and take your stuff with you. It's this portability aspect of where we're moving. And so, you know, DID can be correlated. Like, you can create a DID with a crypto address, public key and private key. And then you can kind of portably move from network to network, and you have all of these different assets tied to you, whether they are NFTs, but also NTTs and different badges and different credentials and reputation. And, you know, that's key, because if big social networks were ever actually to adopt any sort of a free speech possibility, you know, and actually the Blue Sky Project at Twitter are talking about this, and the people at Mastodon and Matrix, about decentralized reputation being portable between all of these different apps. But what does that actually mean in practice? It means that you sort of have your DID, which is your portable identity. That's what has your avatar, has all of your information about you tied to it, as your assets tied to it, as your money tied to it, as your badges tied to it. And depending on whatever site you log into that supports the DID spec, which is an open web standard, which is great, then, you know, that's going to kind of dictate your space in that community. And it actually does make a lot more possible with moderation on a lot of big tech sites. So, you know, and the fact that they're even talking about it, I know that Square's working on it. They have a whole decentralized identity department there. And there was a Twitter space a couple days ago that Jack, my brother, sat in on, he's on the Minds team. And it was the people from Mastodon and Matrix are federated social networks. They're kind of in our realm. I have a lot of respect for both of those projects. And they were actually talking to somebody at the Blue Sky division at Twitter. The Blue Sky division at Twitter was basically this side project that Dorsey started while he was there, which was investigating decentralized social networking. It never went anywhere, and now it's just sort of like, I don't really know if it's abandoned or what's really happening to it, but they were involved in the conversation. So this is just more evidence that they're definitely having these conversations at Twitter. It's not like they're unaware, and that makes it almost more malicious what is happening every day to know that
they're not ignorant. They're not ignorant.
No.
That's crazy. And, you know, it definitely brings up a lot of, you know, questions. The old me would have been all about like making a film to highlight that. And what I actually see a lot more is beautiful is like I'm more excited about the solutions I'm feeling than worried about the problems that I used to see in a certain light. Yeah. And I'm excited about what Minds is doing, the fact that like on the foundation that it sits, and also, you know, having talked with you and having seen, you know, kind of seeing what the intention is on the horizon and what kind of like territory people can play in that's different, what, you know, what that territory engenders as far as you know, what we were talking about as like opening the conversation. And so I'm curious, I'm sitting here on YouTube, we're on YouTube Live, and my curiosity is like, I guess to start wrapping this up, do you have people who stream live on Minds?
I got a special visitor, some background music.
Oh, I'm so familiar with that soundtrack.
They just fell. Are you
guys no.
Yeah,
I'm familiar with that soundtrack that's going on in my house.
I probably should have inverted that and just brought her on, and she would have been totally chill. But you know, whatever. Next time we'll bring her on. Yeah. And so yeah, no, I understand focusing on solutions. It's like at the end of the day, you got to decide where your love and attention is going, and build it. it feels better to build, and as opposed to criticize. And
sometimes you need to break down old edifices to build new in its place. So there's also that, and I appreciate where we went in this conversation. I'm also very excited that like what mine seems to me is a project of engaging with what Bucky Fuller would have said, like what renders the old system obsolete, right? It's not just an attack on the old. It's literally like, it's if it's the future, follow suit. It's not a way of pushing others out. It's just follow suit because this is what's best for the people.
Yeah. Have you heard of his world game concept?
No.
So he came up with this idea. First, it was called the World Peace Game, and then it just sort of got condensed to just the World Game. And it's basically what you're saying, and because that's what his life's work was all about. But the World Game is a game to maximize kind of the well-being of people in the world. And sort of the fact that he was thinking about turning that process into a game, like that's really like, I sort of feel like Minds is a game, and I like, part of me almost wants to do more in gaming, and to bring more game elements into it, because I think that games are more accessible and like sort of what we're talking about, like playfulness and comedy and just like
inviting.
It's just like
interactive.
Like it is a game. I mean, the social media is the game, but if it was framed as a game with also that mission to like maximize, the well-being of humanity, it's like, that's like, I actually do think that given how fast information can move, and just like virality is insane, and applications and networks can grow so fast, like the way that crowdfunding is happening, like, hundreds of millions of dollars can be crowdsourced in like minutes. I mean, we actually do have the tools to sort of manifest a lot of what Bucky Fuller was talking about. I totally am sure that this decade we're going to see just insane shifts of resources and like where people are actually communicating and spending time. So I think that, it's good stuff, man. It's been great chatting, and hope we can keep it going.
Yeah, man. Well, so there's a couple things, like, so I've been moderating not even moderating, just watching the chat, and I'm trying to understand what Matthew Simmerd said. He can make inputs and outputs to make it possible to publish high scores or interact with audience out of Unreal/Unity. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think it's the gaming engine.
Well, there's Unity,
must be
Unity
that
engine,
yeah. No, for sure. And I don't remember everything that you just said, but
well, that's honestly, it's mainly like the gaming thing. The reason why I brought up the metaverse was actually, I'm curious. And we can do this for the next one, get in, deeper into this conversation, but that's what most people think the metaverse is. And most people actually think it's a Facebook thing. But like it's even deeper than that. There's fashion brands that are moving en masse to, some that are doing it for the real world and some that are doing it for the only digital world. There's definitely something happening in that space that's huge. That's why I wanted to bring it up to you, because I can't even tell what I'm sensing in that direction, but I know it's something big. It feels game changer, all over it, written all over it. But without diving down, into that, to wrap this up, I want to know, you reached out to me just recently and you invited me onto your podcast. I wanted to give you an opportunity to just mention what that is and how, people can engage with that?
Yeah, I actually have just been doing interviews and kind of building up a little bit of an archive and like figuring out how to release it. But yeah, so I don't even have a place to go. You can check out all my stuff just at Ottman on mine's OTTMAN. But like last week I talked to Philip Goff. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yeah, I was just watching him on Lex Friedman.
Yeah.
With panpsychism.
Panpsychism.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
I can intro you if you want.
That'd be great.
Are you familiar with panpsychism? That would be a great note.
I'm a panpsychist. I'm all about it. So
nice.
You're preaching here.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like undeniable. I don't know. It's pretty hard to argue. It's kind of like, I find it as hard to argue with as determinism. But anyway, he's like one of the best consciousness researchers in the world right now. Kind of philosophers around fundamental consciousness. And sounds
like he talks about DMT and the value of mystical experiences as well. Yeah, so that's I'll have to check into this guy. Sounds like an interesting
He's really good. And so I'm just like, I've been doing interviews like randomly for years, and I kind of haven't unified it all into something yet, but it's coming. But I sort of sporadically throw stuff out, but I want to get more organized with it. So
well, you're busy.
Well, let's talk.
That's understandable.
Get there. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, dude, I just have to say, man, I really appreciate the time. I went into deep dive mode lately since you connected with me, and I really appreciate everything that, like, all the interviews that I dove into. I really appreciated. Each one had like a certain thing that you would just throw out there that helped me kind of like see the deeper, not even necessity, just the deeper already isness, like it's already done. Almost when people say like, don't manifest from a state of like, I want something, like it is. There's something about this that already feels like, maybe that's where the inevitability feeling comes from. And I just have to say, I appreciate the stick-to-itiveness, because that first question that I gave you, like, was there ever this like, what am I building? What have I gotten myself into, this Mount Everest that I've decided to climb? I'm glad that you've gone into that direction. So I really appreciate it, because I see that, like, I'm also very curious in conversations around, like round tabling where like making it perfectly understood and not volatile why this is, irrefutable. There's a few other ones, but like there's a few elements that make something inevitable, like irrefutability being one of them. Enticing is not one of them, but there's something about this that just seems like it's obviously what the people want. There is an obstacle in the way, which is a lot of the times I really just feel like it's what people know about what's already being done on the platforms they're on. Because most people, they are, I would say probably 90 to 99% of them are oblivious of what data even means. Like why privacy and free speech are even a thing, because they're only talking about, taking pictures of their meals and stuff like that.
I mean, I feel a responsibility, and I think that we've come a long way over the years in terms of, competitive UX. And because you're right that most people, are oblivious, but as soon, and we're close, like we're honestly within, I think the next year or two, we're like, it's going to be pretty indistinguishable functionally from, apps like Instagram and TikTok. And like, if you just look at how fast TikTok emerged, TikTok, I like the thing that I love about TikTok, I dislike most, functionally, UX wise, it's amazing. But, again, it's rotten from the core. So everything about it is synthetic and fake and manipulative. But what is beautiful about it is how fast it emerged. Is that like TikTok, I don't know how old it is even. I think they sort of evolved. I think they used to be this app called Musical.ly, and then they rebranded. But the fact that hundreds of millions of people moved there within like a very short period of time, probably like a period of months, and like that is, and it's similar with Pokemon Go when it first took off. Like the masses will move, and they're happy to move if there is, but you kind of have to combine that freedom value with that just like primal human nature value of like entertainment. And it's like freedom should be entertaining, and it should be gamified in a way where like the people who are oblivious are coming and they don't even know there's freedom there because there's all of this other obvious value to them. But I'm pretty sure that, look, Tim Pool and Rogan are like bigger. CNN is dead, dude. Like they're important.
Proof
like
of concept.
Tim just did a really interesting video comparing his numbers to CNN, and it's just like independent media is already owning the media. Like it is the mainstream. Independent media is mainstream now. It's not even a question. So what that says is that it's not that far away. I mean, but I think a lot of the alternatives just need a little bit more time to evolve the UX, but like we're really close, and it's starting to get to that tipping point. So it's all good, man. We're going to get there, and got to be patient with it.
I love it. It's taking its natural course. I'm excited to see it evolve the way it's evolving. Dude, I just have to say, I really appreciate your time, man. This has been one hell of an episode. Really excited to do that interview with you. We'll get that on the books. And with that being said, man, just, I appreciate the direction you're on. I appreciate having known you for some time, and then our paths collide again. Here we are, man, 10 years later. So
it's been great getting to know you, dude, and I hope we can see each other in the flesh soon, and we'll keep rocking. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here on the Ben Stewart Podcast. Definitely look into minds.com if you haven't already. There's a big growing conversation around what this is, what's happening with the internet. Get involved. Don't leave it to, don't leave it to the others to simply decide where this is headed, because you do have skin in the game, whether you know it or not. So with that being said, every single Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern, we are right here, Ben Stewart Podcast. Mondays, I have the Waking Infinity News. Tuesdays now, I'm doing the deeper dives. Fridays, I do acoustic nights. We have the Discord chat. Please get involved with that. Go over to benjosephstewart.com to see what I'm up to lately, because there's a lot of content coming out. And with that being said, I love you all. Thank you for coming and joining these live conversations, and I'll catch y'all next time on the Ben Stewart Podcast.